according to BuzzFeed, I'm good at making macaroons.
I wouldn't know that.
And also, according to BuzzFeed, I'm not allowed to wear a bra. They have very restrictive quizzes.
Yeah, fuck BuzzFeed. I don't.
We should do a thing where we live by BuzzFeed quizzes for a week. So, like, you know, the ones that are like, what movie should you watch? We should do that.
The 5 movies you can only watch if you've seen Clueless twice.
I saw one quiz the other day that was, you can only wear a bra if you pass this test.
Yeah,
and I was
get
like,
that
that
they're being facetious and overblowing that, but it just sounds stupid.
It really does. I've taken
I
multiple
think you just
quizzes.
described BuzzFeed as a whole.
I've taken multiple quizzes that tell me I will have precisely 0 children.
Ugh.
I think we should do this.
BuzzFeed?
BuzzFeeders?
Do a BuzzFeed article.
No.
BuzzFeed, more like bottom feeder, am I right? Hey,
I actually think we should do this.
This is
Live by BuzzFeed quizzes.
That was a weird mix of like Nigel Thornberry, Jeff Goldblum, and Tom Cruise.
I love her so much.
And you
I'm
know,
bouncing up and down
I
on my office
also-
chair right now.
I'm just visualizing Nigel Thornberry on Oprah Winfrey show.
I also don't think these quizzes are scientifically accurate because here's one that says only people with an IQ of 138 or higher can get 12 out of 15 on this geography test.
Isn't 138 like super high though?
I really don't know, but also I don't think there's any scientific evidence that only people who have an IQ of 138. Like, I just want to see the facts. Look, fake news, BuzzFeed.
The average IQ is 90 to 110.
Oh, so you literally have to be a genius.
Over 120 is superior.
If I learn where those countries are and then I do the test and get 12 out of 15 on it, then I am a genius.
Yeah, so I mean, you
And
should
I
just
can
apply
join
for a
Mensa.
Mensa card right now.
Well, let's fucking do it.
But
Hi,
you know,
everybody.
if we were geniuses of anything, it would be tutor talking.
Hello. Welcome
Hi guys.
Hi,
to Tutor.
Welcome to the show that we do.
I hardly
No,
know her.
We
Are
farmers.
in
Bum, 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 bum.
We're fucking delightful.
Yeah, I thought we were just gonna do the rest of the podcast as doing like one word at a time.
Okay,
Like,
let's.
That would have been.
I'm not
Okay.
clever enough.
All right, let's do it. We're gonna talk about Eustace Chapuy right now. Are you ready?
What?
It's gonna go Emily, Garrett, Jeff. Emily, Garrett, Jeff. You ready?
Okay.
All right. Born,
In
A
city,
located
near
France.
Eustace.
Eustace.
That's his name.
Oh,
His last name's Chapuy-pee.
Chapuy-pee. Shimboopy.
Ambassadored.
Okay, this is getting us nowhere.
I was gonna say the shit out of that.
Now you're starting getting into facts, and Jeff and I can't hang.
Yeah, I know, but we were working it so well because he actually was born in a city near France. Like, we actually were doing
Hey.
it pretty well.
It's like I knew exactly what to say, so it would just get back to you, and you'd have to give all the facts. Playing three-dimensional chess here.
Do you actually want to learn about Eustace Chapuy? Jeff, I like how you were so confused by the Eustace.
Because I hear Eustace, I think Eustace Bags from
Me too.
Cowardly, from Cowardly Dog, Courage the Cowardly Dog. That's all I could think of when you said that.
I think that's what anyone thinks of if they hear Eustace.
If they're worthwhile, that's all they think of.
Stupid Henry. Booga booga booga.
No, let's actually talk about Chapuy. You ready?
Chapuy,
Chapuy-pee, as you say.
the guy that's hard to get. Chapuy, but you can win him yet.
Are you guys ready to rock?
Let's do it.
So, Eustace was born around 1490. It may have been 1492
Ooh, in a city near France.
in a city near France.
You
Good
get a gold
job.
star.
Man, I'm
Very
good at
good
this show.
job. It was the Duchy of Savoy. And
The duchy?
a duchy. And a duchy is in a French thing. And it was like an area of land. I'm confirming this right now via Google. And it's a territory that a duke or a duchess sees. It's also called that's what you get a dukedom. France had duchies first. And I think it was Edward III who was like, well, I like that idea. I want dukes. So it was the Duchy of Savoy.
It just sounds like a appliance brand.
It was an appliance brand. They also made really good washing machines. So he had 5 siblings. He was the second son,
Oh.
which, sometimes works out if you're Henry VIII.
Yeah.
His father was Louis. Okay, here's the thing. I'm pronouncing it
Louis
Louis.
Chapuy.
Okay, so it could be worse because it might be. How would you say it? I think it would be Louis because
I think
Duchy of
it's
Savoy. Is
Louis.
Louis Chapuy. Yeah,
Parents did not love him.
That is the most French name I've ever heard.
Guys, I know. I don't want to say this. I'd hate
Next to Francois Baguette.
Oh yes, classic Francois.
Typical French.
Did you guys see? I saw it on Reddit the other day. It was a post titled "The Most French Thing I've Ever Seen," and it's a vending machine where you pay with your card and then it just deposits a baguette for you.
I want one of those. Fucking love baguettes.
I thought it just like
Yeah.
you pay it money and then it just surrenders to you.
Look, it's for people trying to give up smoking.
So far, I'm 2 days without a cigarette.
No way.
Yeah.
Good job, Garrett.
All those
Everybody
big-
give
yeah.
Garrett a round of applause.
it's all those
wanna-
baguettes he's eating.
All those baguettes.
I want to snap everyone's neck that I walk by, but other than that, I'm doing pretty good, I think.
Garrett, I'm so proud of you.
Woo.
Thank you. I'm doing my best to try.
Chapuy would be proud of you too. Louis Chapuy would be proud
I'm
of you.
doing it for him. I'm not doing it for anybody else. Not doing it for myself. I'm doing it for Louis Chapuy.
So Louis Chapuy was actually a notary, which instantly makes me think of Jerry Gergich.
Is anyone here a notary? I'm a notary.
And he was something called a syndic. Yeah.
What?
SYNDIC.
Isn't that something like when they put a show after it's already aired? It's like
That's called
reruns?
syndication.
Yeah, he puts things in syndication.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Louis
And-
Chapuy was in syndication. They showed reruns all the
And he
time.
notarized it too while he was at it.
And he notarized it.
Emily,
What?
a syndic, according to the Oxford Dictionary, is a
One?
government official in various countries.
Yes.
Or, in the UK, a business agent of certain universities and corporations.
I looked it up on Wikipedia, and it was one who helps in a court of justice, an advocate or representative.
I went off the top of my head and I got nothing.
I got syndication. His mother's name was, God forgive me, Juigone? Juigone? I mean, I
spell
hope
it?
it's not Qui-Gon.
Qui-Gon Jinn.
Chapuy.
She is Qui-Gon Jinn. It's spelled Guigonne.
Guion?
No,
Sean?
Gigon. I'm going with Gigon.
She gone or she here?
Gigon. Thank you, Marx Brothers. Her last name was Dupuy, so there was Chapuy and Dupuy.
Not confusing.
I know. She may have been a noble. And that's his family. So in 1507, he attended the University of Turin, Turin. And that kind of got me thinking, do you think in the olden days they went through that whole college selection process where they're talking to counselors in their schools and they're like, I don't know which school I want to go to. This one's got really great frats, but this one's got the program I really want, and this one's got a great sports team. They are so good at jousting.
I mean, I like that. Like that's their college resume. Well, he never got jousted to the face, so he might be good to have here.
He got a full ride fox hunt scholarship.
So Eustace Chapuy got a full ride fox hunting scholarship to the University of Turin.
That is not fact.
Yes, it is.
It is now.
Horse facts, yes, it is.
Horse facts, yes, it is.
Sorry,
So-
folks, that was an inside joke completely with us three.
Are those saved anywhere?
I don't know because that was all on the Wii U Miiverse, and I think that got shut down.
God,
Aww.
I hope he took pictures.
I wish I did. I should have screenshot them.
I looked for those for so long I couldn't find them. Anyway, continue.
So he chose to study law. So then he ended up going to the University of Valencia in 1512. And then in 1515, he went to the University of Sapienza in Rome. And he got a doctorate of civil and canon laws. So he was a doctor lawyer, which sounds like something from Arrested Development.
Or a brand new sitcom, Doctor Lawyer.
He was probably so pretentious, though. Like, he was both a doctor and a lawyer. He was probably the most obnoxious person.
I'll tell you how you're sick, both physically and legally.
Tonight on ABC, the latest drama. Dr. Lawyer. He's a lawyer, but he's also a doctor.
Starring John Stamos.
That is fucking perfect. Because, he's got to try and save lives, but he's got to protect lives.
Yeah.
But can he keep his own love life straight?
The episode's greatest story arc is when he has to sue himself for malpractice.
Oh my God. That's genius.
I swear to God, if I see this show actually come out next fall, I'm
TM,
going to be so
trademark,
pissed.
trademark.
Trademark Tutor.
So,
Trademark Tutor Incorporated. That's our company.
I like it. So he was a humanist, and that
Well,
means
that's good.
yeah, I know. So he was a friend of Thomas More, the guy who wrote Utopia, and Erasmus, who is another famous humanist from that time. So I fucking hate the dictionary sometimes because I Googled humanist and it was like, one who studies humanism. And I'm like, you fucking piece of shit.
Thanks, asshole.
I didn't even want to look it up after that. I was like, no, fuck you. You don't get my cookies. So in
No doy
1570,
dictionary.
what?
I said no doy dictionary.
Redundant. Look up.
I'm a philosophist, one who studies philosophy. Fucking piece of shit. So in 1517, I didn't know this, he was ordained. So he became the canon of a cathedral of Geneva and the dean of Viri.
Ring-a-ding-ding.
Ring-a-ding-ding.
So far, it sounds like you're just describing the most interesting man in the world circa
I mean,
The
he gets
1600s.
more
1500s.
interesting.
1500s.
So he was an official at the Diocese of Geneva, and he ended up serving both the Duke of Savoy and then the Duke of Bourbon.
I want to be the Duke of Bourbon.
He drank they invented bourbon. Probably, that's true.
They made Wild Turkey back then.
Yes.
I think that's Mac's title.
Yes, that is.
I'm changing his contact phone in my phone. So when he was serving under the Duke of Bourbon, he became an ambassador for the Duke of Bourbon at Charles V's court in Granada. So he first visited England in 1526. This was before he worked for Charles V. But then the Duke of Bourbon died. He probably drank too much. And Charles V.
What are the odds?
Who'd have thunk? And then he entered the service of Charles V, who was the Holy Roman Emperor. So we've had this discussion before, and I've had this conversation with many of my historically, what's that called when they really like history? Historically
History buffs.
acclimated,
I guess.
intimated.
History inclined.
And the people I know who like history.
Historically
I'm good with
inept.
words.
Nerds. We
It's
call
the
them just
opposite of
nerds.
inept.
I don't know.
All of our listeners are probably screaming it at me right now.
Go to dictionary.com.
No, fuck you, dictionary. So I wanted to look up the Holy Roman Emperor.
Historiist. One who likes history.
Did you just look that up?
No.
Okay, well, it's a new word.
Hysteria.
All my historiist friends and I have had this discussion many times because I don't understand the Holy Roman Empire. I don't understand the Holy Roman Emperor. And every time I look it up, I just get more confused. So
It's an empire. They're religious.
I started
Everything's
looking it up.
holy.
No. I looked up Holy Roman Empire first, and that was just so fucking confusing. So I just looked up the Holy Roman Emperor. So they are an elected monarchy. So Charles V was the King of Spain and the Holy Roman Emperor. So it's an elected monarchy chosen by prince electors, which is just like an electoral college. They're just a group of people who get to do this job. And they are, according to, so like the other Roman Catholic rulers of Europe would say that the Holy Roman Emperor ruled by divine right. And also it said they often contradicted or rivaled the Pope. But I was confused about that because the Pope also crowned the Holy Roman Emperor. So I don't fucking know. And they were considered the quote unquote first among equals of the monarchs in Europe. So I don't have a fucking clue. And
I zoned out there.
If anybody can explain the Holy Roman Empire
In simple
in
layman terms.
stupid Emily terms, please message me.
We'll take pictograms too.
We'll take an infographic.
Yeah. We'll
Anything.
take a PowerPoint.
I'll do a PowerPoint. So anyway, that was a side point, but I was like hoping I'd finally be able to explain the Holy Roman Empire, and lo and behold, I can't. So anyway, in 1529, Charles V appointed him his ambassador. So England had a couple of Spanish ambassadors in the years. There was some kerfuffle going on with all the Spanish ambassadors.
Nothing to do with Aragon?
With Catherine?
Yeah.
Not so much at that point. He replaced Mendoza, and this was in 1529, before the divorce became the great matter. He actually lived near Thomas Cromwell, so those must have been some really fun block parties. But Catherine had actually requested Chapuy because of his legal background. So she knew something was going on, so he would have been perfect to defend Catherine of Aragon. So here's what Chapuys is really well known for. His hatred of Anne Boleyn. I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Charles V was Catherine of Aragon's aunt, and he took his directions from Charles V. So Charles V would have hated the woman who replaced his aunt, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's said that he referred to her as the great concubine or the whore only.
Subtle.
Right. So it's super subtle. It's said that he only referred to her as those words, or sometimes just that lady. But that all comes from 1800s historians, which have a very fucked up view of Anne Boleyn and what was going on in the court at that time. Plus, it was really hard to Google in the 1800s, so they couldn't really confirm everything.
They couldn't go to dictionary.com back then.
To fuck you, dictionary.com. So there's an author or a historian. Her name is Lauren Mackay, Mackay, and she wrote a biography on Chapuy. Apparently, his earlier reports concerning Anne were nice. He called her Lady Anne, the Lady, Mademoiselle Boleyn, things like that. So back to my papers. He was referring to her that from the minute he arrived 1529 until about 1533, he was fine with her. He called her the concubine once from 1533 to 1536. And that was when he was incredibly distressed. And then when Catherine died, he was even more emotionally distressed. He was very distraught over her death and all that stuff. So one of the best things about Chapuy is that he communicated a lot. Of all the ambassadors, he was the most communicative. So his letters were very long and very detailed. But this made him a great source of historical information about Anne, about Henry, about the court, all of that stuff.
Okay, so we probably got a lot of information just from him.
Tons. Most of it.
That's
and
cool.
That's where a lot of current rumors are blamed on. They say Chapuy gave us this information, so it must have been accurate. Or if you don't like Chapuy, they say Chapuy gave us this information and he fucking hated Anne, so he's the villain and it's probably very wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It's more likely somewhere in the middle. So when he wrote his letters, he would include the rumors that everybody at court was saying, but then he would also put his own information that he has. So he wasn't just a gossip, which a lot of people consider him.
Yeah.
Part of the problem is that other ambassadors were writing some pretty awful shit about Anne. Like, she was kind of reviled across the courts of Europe. She was just scandalous. He just happens to be credited with most of it. So, for example, there's a letter that is unsigned about Anne's coronation, and it says, quote, "The crown became her very ill, and a wart disfigured her very much. She wore a violet velvet mantle with a high ruff of gold thread and pearls, which concealed a swelling she has resembling a goiter." So basically he's saying she's disfigured and ugly. So the letter's unsigned and it's credited towards Chapuy, except Chapuy always signed his letters.
Old-timey roasts were great.
Old-timey what?
Old-timey roasts.
It was a rap battle. They were doing...
I don't know if you're going to get to this, but I'm like kind of following along on Wikipedia as you're talking about this guy.
Uh-huh.
And it says, and you'll probably dispute this because it's along the same lines, but quoting Wikipedia, it has been believed that Chapuy despised Anne and could never bring himself to say her name, referring to her only as the, quote, whore or, quote, concubine.
Yep.
Although that's a rumor. That's not a confirmed thing.
Yes. I mean, he did call her concubine.
Oh, shit.
I think I have it quoted down here. Okay, yes, I do. So, here's what Chapuy had to say about her downfall. He didn't actually believe the story about Anne having incest, about Anne sleeping around. He didn't believe that at all. And other historians acknowledge that as well. So even though it would have been great for Chapuy to believe that stuff, he was not going to fall into that just because he didn't personally agree with her politics, really.
Right.
So he actually admired both Anne and George's behavior during the trial, reported elsewhere. And it's really interesting because even the things that are like, oh, Chapuy hated Anne. He called her the great whore, the great concubine. He refused to acknowledge her. He did everything he could to avoid her. He just hated her. Yet he did acknowledge that she was very strong. So clearly he's a moral, upright character. People can kind of twist whatever they see. So he wasn't a perfect guy. He did occasionally call Elizabeth a little bastard. But also he would call her the other daughter and the king's daughter. So there is a famous episode of Henry tricking Chapuy into acknowledging Anne. It wasn't really a trick. He bowed to them and she acknowledged the acknowledgement. So here's what people think happened. Here's the big dramatic story. Chapuy hated Anne, and he refused to acknowledge her. He refused to incline his head and bow slightly to her to say, yes, you are superior than me. You are the queen. However, one day, right before Anne's downfall in 1536, also, I'm cutting myself off. We may have talked about this in the Anne Boleyn episode. I just can't remember. Okay, back to it. In 1536, right before Anne's downfall around Easter, Henry was adamant that Chapuy would acknowledge Anne. This was important because if Chapuy acknowledged Anne, it meant Charles V acknowledged Anne. So what they did was they tricked Chapuy into acknowledging Anne by Henry appearing with Anne. So Chapuy had to acknowledge both of them. And so it totally showed up Chapuy. He was so embarrassed. He didn't want to do it, but he had no choice. And he was tricked into doing it. And it was a victory for Henry and Anne.
King Henry.
Except
Anne.
that's not really what happened. So this is what really happened. Anne had never acknowledged Charles V. Therefore, she could not recognize Chapuy. She could not acknowledge him. So Anne knew that once Catherine was dead, it would be good to come to peace with Spain. Spain was bitching with England partially because of the Catherine stuff, and now Catherine was gone. So Spain was like, well, this is expensive. I'm tired of doing this. I need some peace. Let's just BFF.
We're tired now.
Yeah, let's just BFF with England. Anne understood that that was going to happen. So she had to acknowledge Chapuys, therefore Charles V. She had to do it first. So this is what happened. Chapuys went to Henry with letters from Charles, and he worked with Cromwell to come to some peace between the two kings, between England and between Spain. Before Easter Mass, Cromwell asked Chapuys if he would meet Anne, but Anne had to do it first. He said, this is in a letter from Chapuys to Charles, quote, before the king went out to Mass, Cromwell came to me on his part to ask if I would not go and visit and kiss the concubine. So there he did say the concubine. I thought such a visit would not be advisable, and I begged Cromwell to excuse it and dissuaded the said visit. Chapuys was also on good terms with the Boleyn men, George and Thomas. He had dinner with them. And on Easter Mass, George was being super friendly, overly friendly, obnoxiously friendly.
Very friendly, George.
And so Chapuys was put on guard. And then after Mass, George stood by Chapuys. And Chapuys did not object to being moved to where the royal couple would pass. So the royal couple would come down from the royal chapel, and George positioned Chapuys to be there. Henry and Anne descended from the royal chapel, and Chapuys in his letter said, quote, I must say that she was affable enough on the occasion, for on my being placed behind the door by which she entered the chapel, she turned round to return the reverence which I made her when she passed. So they acknowledged each other. That's the story. It was a good moment politically. It was a good moment for diplomacy, but it was not a trick. So as I said, when Catherine died, he was very emotionally distraught. It was heartbreaking for him. He was super loyal to Mary, Catherine's daughter, very affectionate towards her, and in return, Mary trusted Chapuys. He didn't last much longer in England, though. In 1539, he developed gout, so he probably didn't drink enough lice beer or shave enough foxes to fix it. And besides 2 brief breaks, he stayed pretty consistently in England, which, I mean, I think I said that they went through a couple ambassadors in the 5 years before, Chapuys showed up. So it was pretty cool that he stayed for so long. It was 15 years. So he played a huge role in fixing the Anglo-imperial relations. He helped negotiate that final alliance, and then because of that, they declared war together against France in 1543. Henry was probably happy. However, his gout continued to get worse, and in 1544, he asked the king to call him back. They had to wait for a replacement, so it wasn't until 1545 that he left. So he ended up living in retirement. He moved to the Low Countries, which I still don't know exactly what those are, but it's currently Belgium. And he was actually pretty fucking wealthy. He had all the money from...
when you're a doctor lawyer...
The doctor lawyer was so wealthy. He had all the money from being an ambassador, from his inheritance, some shit with the churches and abbacy. He had lots of money. He ended up setting up a college in 1548, and he founded a grammar school in 1551. Nerd. So even though he was retired, he still acted as an advisor to Charles V between 1547 and 1549. He was offering advice on Mary I and what a potential marriage would look like with her and all that stuff. So he played a really important role in world politics and the superpower politics of that time. He ended up dying on January 21st, 1556. And there's not really much of a post-credit scene for Chapuys. It was just that he died.
There's no Nick Fury at the end saying, you're going to join the History Avengers.
Yeah, nothing like that. But that is the unraveled mystery of Chapuys.
The Chapuys mystery.
The Chapuys mystery. So hold on. Okay. So I know that was pretty quick. However, I have some information about something that's not Chapuys. So one of our listeners requested this topic. a couple weeks ago, months ago. And it's I was going to do a full episode on it a couple weeks ago, but it just doesn't have enough information. So I thought I'd tack it on to this. One of our listeners was curious about how inheritance laws worked in that time period.
And who was a legal person?
Hint, only landowning white males.
No.
Yes.
I don't believe it.
Shocking.
Shocked, I tell you. Shocked. Not that shocked.
So here's how inheritance worked back then. In the early Middle Ages, so 1200s, 1300s, a brother would take precedence over sons of dead kings. So if Richard the First, he had a son, but he also had an older brother. So when Richard the First died, he had a younger brother. So when Richard the First died, his brother John became the king. He also killed his nephew in order to secure that he'd be king, but he became king before the nephew was dead. Details. During the Tudor times that changed. So children of either gender would inherit before a brother. So that's partially why during the Wars of the Roses, the Yorks were like, oh, we totally should have had the crown because we're descended from that brother before that brother. It's confusing. So in France, they followed something called Salic law. And that is an ancient, obsolete legal code from the 5th century of a Salian Frankish kingdom that said men inherited landed property and women can only inherit personal property. So a woman could inherit jewelry, but she couldn't inherit a kingdom. Get it?
Got it.
She could
Good.
She could inherit something that's finite. He could inherit something that'll set him up for life because, sexism. Scotland followed semi-Salic laws. So that meant male heirs from an unbroken line of males were preferred to females. So if there was a king and he had a daughter and he had a brother and the brother had a son, the son, let's say the king and his brother died, the son of that brother would have inherited before the daughter of the king.
So the nephew would be more.
The nephew would have inherited.
Huh.
Okay.
Does that make sense? And his brother, if the brother had been alive, he would have inherited before the daughter. So it's semi-Salic. Now, it didn't mean the daughter couldn't inherit at all, as we saw with like Mary, Queen of Scots,
Yes.
So in France, however, they followed Salic law. And so that is women cannot inherit no matter what. I give zero shit. So in France, they ended up giving the king the crown to like your father's brother's best friend's former roommate because he was a man.
So wait, what does that make us?
Absolutely nothing.
Thank you.
So here's an example. In 1515, when Louis XII died, his cousin's son became the king. He was King Francis. So here's something interesting. There's a Duchy of Brittany. We were just talking about duchies. However, that duchy was not part of the Kingdom of France. It was just owned by, it was inherited through the female line. They did allow female inheritance. And Louis XII's wife had inherited it. And so when she died, it would have gone to Louis's daughter, Claude, because she would have inherited it from her mother, because that's where the inheritance came from.
Okay.
Well, the French king didn't want to give up the wealth of the Duchy of Brittany. So he just married his cousin so that they could keep it. So she married Francis. England recognized the female succession, so they claimed kingship of France. So when the English kings say King of France, they're saying it's because of a marriage from a female, like a princess of France. But France doesn't recognize that princesses can inherit. So they say, no, this doesn't count. So it's two kingdoms laws butting heads. Here's something really interesting. So we know Mary the First was the first female ruler in a long time. The last one before Mary the First was Empress Matilda. And she ruled in the 1100s. And not a lot of people actually count her as ruling. They count her cousin King Stephen as the ruler during that time. So she was the daughter, the only surviving daughter. That's a funny story. So, I mean, not really funny. It's kind of sad. It's kind of sad. So she did have a brother, a legitimate brother. And then there was an episode on a ship and things didn't end well. What happened was there was a ship called, oh my God, I almost said the Wolf of, I wrote down a comparison to the Wolf of Wall Street and I almost said the ship was called the Wolf of Wall Street. No, so they got hammered like it was the Wolf of Wall Street. All these men on the ship got hammered. So the king was on one ship and the crown prince, the Prince of Wales, was on another ship. And the second ship, everybody got fucking hammered. And they're like, let's race the king's ship. So they raced it, hit a rock, and it sank like the Titanic. So good news, the prince got off onto a rowboat. However, his half-sister was on the ship, and he heard her screaming. So he turned his rowboat around. It was swamped, and he drowned. Yes. So his sister Matilda was called back. She wasn't the Empress of England. She married an emperor, and then that emperor died, but she was still loved in that country and called Empress Matilda. So she ended up going to war with her cousin Stephen, and it was a whole thing, and bad things happened. But that was the last time that there was a female ruler in England, the 1100s. Just because of that. Now, there were a lot of times where there was a risk of a female inheriting. For example, Richard III, when his son died, his niece would have been his only option if he hadn't declared her a bastard. But he did have a sister, Elizabeth de la Pole, who is the Duchess of Suffolk, and he named his sons his heirs.
You know, that brings me to a question.
That gives me an answer.
Maybe. So could a king, like, if he thought his kid was like a shithead and didn't want his kid to inherit, like, could he just say, I don't recognize this kid, even though it's clearly his kid?
Yes and no. Okay. William the Conqueror did that. He didn't like his eldest son, and so William the Conqueror married his wife Matilda before he conquered England. He was the Duke of Normandy. Mm-hmm. And when he became king, he didn't like his son, his eldest son, and he was like, I'm going to name you my heir as the Duke of Normandy, but I'm going to name your brother, who was the only son of mine born while I was King of England and on English soil, I'm going to name him King of England. So the older brother went to civil war with the younger brother, so that was sad. Queen's podcast just did an episode about Matilda of Flanders. That was her, right? Was that her? So if you want to learn more about this, you should go listen to that episode because she did an excellent job. Or Nathan and Katie did an excellent job. So Matilda of Flanders, they did it this past February, or past November. So go listen to that episode. It's really good. But back to your question. William the Conqueror was able to get away with that. Queen Victoria hated her eldest son. She blamed him for the death of her husband, Albert, because he had some hookers. Not lying. And Albert, the king, he wasn't the king, the prince, went to Albert, the husband of Victoria, went to the country where the eldest son was and was like, get rid of the hookers. And on his way back, he got sick and died. So Victoria blamed him, and she clung to power to avoid him having any. Like, she was in her 80s, and she was like not letting. He would have had to pry that power from her cold dead hands, and he didn't have any political power. She didn't give him anything to do until she died. So I don't think they could just disinherit, but I don't know enough about all the kings and queens to know if that happened. I feel like if it had happened, I would have heard about it. But good question, Garrett.
Huh.
Thanks.
Now, boys and girls, any other questions?
No, I think we got it all.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of any Chapuy questions at all.
Chappy.
Chappy?
Chappy.
I am Chapuy.
Chappy love mommy.
Oh, my God.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess. I can't
Enough
think of
Chappy
anything.
talk.
Is everybody sufficient?
Oh yes.
Okay.
Quite.
I hope that was a good one.
I feel
I
full
like
but
it,
not
yeah.
stuffed.
I feel full but not stuffed. I'm pleasantly full.
I am very tired today, so I'm not quite on.
Oh
as I
God, dude, so
normally
am
am.
I. It's been crazy, a crazy week.
Mhm.
So
Well,
Tell me about it.
Especially since we're even like putting this out late too.
yeah, sorry it's a little bit later, guys, but
Oh well, at least a day
Crazy,
late
crazy
rather than
week.
no episode at all.
yeah,
Right.
hope you liked it.
You get what you pay for.
Can't always get. Anyway, if you liked us, rate and review us on iTunes and tell other people about us. And check us out on Twitter at Tudor Know Her, and check us out on Facebook at Tudor I Hardly Know Her. I like chatting with people on those. I have a couple of people who messaged me weeks ago, and I still need to respond to them. I promise I haven't ignored you. I am just brain dead right now. So,
I had fun pimping out our show to a customer the other day.
really?
This woman came into my store and she was a teacher looking for movies. And one of the movies she was asking about was Elizabeth the Golden Age. So I telling her about how like you're a big history buff and everything. Like, yeah, we have a whole podcast. And she's like, oh, what's it called? I told her to hardly know her. I quickly had to say it's not very
not class
appropriate.
appropriate.
Yeah. So don't get too
This
excited.
is adult only.
She turned her nose up and walked off.
I hope you guys just don't
Why,
sit there
I
and go on.
never.
Hope you guys don't go off on banters and talk about nonsense.
That's all we do.
I don't think we actually talk. I think it's mostly banter, less tutor.
I think it was a pretty banter light episode.
It was.
Yeah.
It was very banter light,
And
I
ABC,
think.
I better get my check for that Dr. Lawyer show.
Yeah, guys. John Stamos, if you take money for that, we're suing you too. We're going to become our own doctor lawyers.
With blackjack and hookers.
Well,
So, guys, until next time.
until next time.
Until next time.
Divorce,
Divorce,
beheaded,
beheaded,
died.
died.
Divorce,
Divorce,
beheaded,
beheaded,
survived.
survived.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.